The seventh episode of The Twilight Zone is pure science fiction, something that hasn't happened since episode one. And even that may not have been quite so clearly so. But like that one, there's no magic in this episode, no supernatural elements or figures like the devil. This is just a futuristic story, well told, exploring ideas like the effects of isolation, the ethics of punishment, and the human need for connection. It also contains one of the most shocking moments in television history, which surely must have given some young viewers nightmares for years to come. It also perfectly demonstrates one of Rod Serling's recurring themes, humanity's relationship with technology. We'll explore all that and more today at the No Rules Film School.
I am zero budget New York City guerrilla filmmaker Sean Weathers.
And I'm Canadian screenwriter and playwright Angus Combe. Watch along with us as we comment on, react to, and review Episode 7 of Rod Serling's The Twilight Zone. It's called The Lonely, and you are watching Screened.
We have another classic on our hands, I believe.
I
What is
think
the
we do.
consensus here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a great episode. Perhaps only second to number 5 so far. I think this is my second favorite so far.
I think I would be right in line with you with that conclusion. I think it's a classic. I think it's not quite as good as episode 5, but I think it's top tier Twilight Zone. It's everything
Yeah,
you love about the Twilight Zone. It's sci-fi. It has that linear storyline with a really good performance to anchor it, and an interesting concept with the twists being something that is surprising on a first viewing, or if you don't fully remember the story, but still satisfying on multiple viewings. Sometimes you can have something that doesn't really get that surprise factor, but it has the quality ending. This has the surprise factor and the quality ending, so it works twofold. It's not like, oh, what a twist. And then it's like the second time you see it, it's like, all right, here comes the twist again. It Everything builds up perfectly, and I think it's a well-crafted story.
yeah, absolutely. It's not a cheap twist. It's not just there to shock you. It's actually completely logical and it makes perfect sense. And it seems inevitable. It seems like exactly what needed to happen. So yeah, I think it's a great episode, great piece of writing. And of course, we are here in Death Valley, I believe, where they shot this episode. And apparently it was super, super hot, very, very difficult to work in these conditions. And they'd originally intended to shoot the whole thing there, but they wound up going back to Hollywood and shooting the interiors in Hollywood because it was just too hot. And I think at least one person collapsed from the heat. So, very, very hot location.
Yeah. This episode starts off with narration. I watched it twice before we did this rewatch here for the recording. And I thought to myself on the second time I watched it, I didn't think the narration was necessary. I think the performance and his excitement for company and for them coming, I think it does a good enough job of telling the story. And it also builds up more intrigue because you don't quite know what's going on. And then maybe in their dialogue where you have a lot of exposition, you could find out more what's going on.
Yeah, I could see that. I think for me, the narration, it's kind of always just there, right? It's sort of part of the show, so it kind of feels right. But yeah, they probably could have done it without the narration, and it would have made perfect sense.
No. This is a this is a sign of the times where it's you got to have that suspension of disbelief. And their space outfits are like old-timey football helmets with no mask and the
Yes,
jumpsuit. We're from the
yes,
future and we're in
yes,
space, and the ship
yes,
lands like you see how far in the distance it lands. It's like, why not just land right next to them? And there's no
yeah,
vehicle. Did they walk all the way there? Like, obviously, these are things you're not supposed to be thinking about, but you
yeah,
just see the ship land so far away, and then they're walking to them. It's like, that's a hell of a
yeah,
trek, you know?
yeah. And I think that was stock footage that they actually showed in reverse because you don't normally see rockets land like that. You see them take off like that. But I think they just reversed a takeoff shot and used that. Um, but yeah, it's not entirely
Somewhere
realistic.
up there, down there, wherever, Ed Wood is smiling.
Indeed.
I
Yes, and of
love
course,
I love the quirky antagonists that this show seems to have. Speaking of Ed Wood, the last time we saw a quirky antagonist like this was um uh not Walter Matthau, the guy who played Bela Lugosi in the Ed Wood movie.
Martin
That was
Landau.
Martin Landau. His performance in was it episode two or three?
I,
Episode three, Mr.
three,
Denton on
episode three.
Doomsday or something. Yeah.
Yes.
He
Yeah.
played that little really annoying, funny, quirky antagonist character, and we have another one of those here that just they're an a-hole, but they're funny and they bring a lot of levity to the story. I'm normally not a big fan of comedy or side characters or comedy characters to bring levity, but when they do a great job, I definitely have to point it out.
Yes. Absolutely. And that was Ted Knight, who a lot of people would recognize from shows like The Mary Tyler Moore Show and Too Close for Comfort. And he was also in movies like Caddyshack. This is like an early performance from him, and it's very, very different. It's not what we're used to seeing. Although in a way,
Mhm.
you kind of see where he's heading. But
Yeah, I could see it in Caddyshack. That was the
yes,
crescendo of his a-hole character.
that's right. Yes. And interestingly, he's not even credited in this episode. He's not listed in the credits. Um, as the guy who's with him, James Turley, the other crew member there. And nobody ever talks about James Turley, but he was in a few things, and I guess never became a star like Ted Knight. So people don't talk about the fact that he didn't get credited here. But
Well, they match up his performance. He
yeah,
doesn't talk, so why should we talk about him?
that's true. And I mean, that's the weird thing is like it makes sense to not credit him, but Ted Knight has quite a few lines, and
And
they
he's
still
very
don't.
good.
He is, yeah, he's very good. Surprising they don't list him. And
A
of
few other
course,
things that don't quite make sense, but they don't detract from the story. But there's a fan in the background. There was a fridge that he grabbed the beer from to see if it was cold before they landed, then offered them a beer. There's running water that he's using when he washed his face. Like, where is he washing his clothes? Like, all of these questions just
yeah,
pop into my head. Like, how is any of this possible? Where's the plumbing? I do see some
yes,
spades there, so maybe there's a bunch of like ditches of poo around the shack or something.
yes. Wow.
But
Yes, probably not something that the censors wanted us to even talk about back then,
no.
but yeah, and I mean the other thing is too, they seem to be claiming that this is an asteroid that he's living on, which of course isn't realistic. An asteroid would never have an atmosphere that people would breathe, and this clearly looks more like a planet than an asteroid. But I think it's this show and certainly this episode, it's not what we would call hard science fiction in terms of it's not trying to show us how the machine works and be really, really realistic in that way. It's more about the human drama, and it's just kind of setting up the human drama. So the details that aren't so real, I don't think they matter in the end, but it is kind of funny when you think about them.
Yeah, it's funny just because this is the third time I've seen this in a very short period of time, but that's just all like levity type things that I'm bringing up. This episode's
Yes.
great, and it's about the ideas. It's what a lot of good science fiction is. My favorite movie of all time is a science fiction movie that is steeped in facts to a point where it almost predicted the future in 2001: A Space Odyssey. But most science fiction, I think, are about exploring ideas and themes and philosophies and the human emotion and relationships, and it's an avenue to like tell politics or time things going on in the time it was made. It's just a way to explore ideas in all type of facets. Like another movie similar to the 2001 that is a response to it that we covered on this, Solaris, or
Mm.
some things similar to this like Ex Machina, Her. There are a
Yeah.
lot of science fiction that are more in line with this, where realism is out the door, and they explore what makes someone real or human, what constitutes that. I think Her was a great movie that did it, Ex Machina. And I'm sure if I think of it, there's like a ton of other movies that explore these ideas, either before or after this. But I think this does it extremely well within a very short period of time.
Yes, absolutely. And yes, science fiction is very good at letting us comment on the current world in a way that people, especially the censors at the time, wouldn't have even noticed necessarily because it's science fiction. So the story's set in the future. So, on the surface, it's not about our current society, but it could really be about our current society. And it lets the filmmakers or the writers actually say things that they might not be able to say if this was set in 1959, in just kind of a realism type of story.
Hmm. I think another thing that science fiction helps us explore, and this particular episode helps us explore, is fear. The fear of our humanity, the fear of technology, the fear of the future, the fear of change. This, obviously titled Lonely, explores certain elements like that. And obviously it has a robot. So it gets into technology, time
Yes.
moving past you, the fear of like what is this technology going to do to our world? Not embracing it too much, playing God. All those themes are kind of explored here to various degrees, obviously.
Yeah. And he certainly rejects this robot at the beginning. He doesn't want any
Correction,
part of it.
robot.
Robot. Yes. So yeah, it's he kind of, in a way, could be the voice of a typical opinion here that, oh, this is wrong. This isn't right to have a sort of fake human being or whatever. But of course, it's going to play out very differently. And this is Jean Marsh here, who's playing Alicia, the robot. And I think it's interesting that they don't make her look as like she could look super beautiful and she could
There
be
she
made
goes,
up.
taking a beer out the fridge.
Yeah, she kind of looks like an ordinary woman in a way. Like
A
she's not
record
like a.
player, again, a record player playing.
Yes.
I
Oh
don't know
yes.
how it's playing, but I'm sorry, continue.
Good questions. Yeah, absolutely. But you can't help but think when you're looking at a story like this where a man gets a robot and it's a woman and
Robot.
a robot and she's an attractive woman. You can't help but wonder, like, is there an element of what people might refer to today as a sex doll or something like that, because there are companies that do manufacture these very realistic dolls, and they are apparently getting into this where they're trying to make them essentially like real people. They're like robots.
Mm. Yeah, I think this
So
more explores companionship rather than um sexual gratification. That could be because of the censorship, or that could be because they were aiming for something different. But you do have that whole male gaze thing. That's certainly an aspect of filmmaking and movies and TV shows. Like, why does she have to be young and pretty? Part
mhm.
of, I think, what makes this episode interesting is, again, it's a very short period of time to tell a lot of story in. But in the conversation, he does mention the fact that it could be that she's projecting what he wants to hear, or she's playing off of what he wants, which is, I think, what made Her so interesting. And some other interesting sci-fi movies where they're dealing with artificial intelligence is this artificial intelligence just adapting to what you need, or are they sentient, or are they just a reflection of your needs? And I think it's subtly addressed in this, and I think that's adds another layer of complexity. And maybe the way she looks is a projection of what he needs as well. And I thought, what would have been interesting, for a twist at the end, is if she didn't really look like that. She only
Mm,
looked like that in his mind. And we saw when the other astronauts came back that they didn't see her that way. I thought that would have
mhm.
been another layer of twist to it, but as is,
Yeah,
it's quite good.
yeah, absolutely. And yeah, that is a question that you can't help but wonder is how much of this is kind of in his mind. Like, is he imagining her to be more real than she actually is? Um, and we don't know the answer to that really. But
Or is her just her computer mainframe or her mind just adapting to everything he wants as she takes in the information from him, you know?
yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah,
He
another
needs tears
possibility.
right now. He needs empathy right now. Like, she could just be calculating that as she interacts with him, just reading his desperation and his need for companionship.
Yeah, that's entirely possible. Or she could be uh, a robot with feelings.
Yeah.
We
That's what
don't
makes
know.
good sci-fi is you can interpret it in a lot of different ways. I think this is
Yeah,
particularly cruel. Here we have a cardboard box with like nuts and bolts.
yeah,
They obviously gave him a lot of stuff. They couldn't give him a real checkerboard or a real chessboard. Like he had to
yeah,
make one. Like of
yeah,
all the stuff
yeah,
they gave him, they couldn't give him like a real game to play. He had
yeah.
to make his own.
True enough. Yeah, that's a good point. Um, Perhaps we should mention too that this is Jack Warden who's playing our hero Corey, who's a very recognizable actor. He's just been in tons of stuff, and I'm not sure if I always knew his name, but I would see him in tons of things, and he's great. He's very good in this,
Can
and
you
he's
name some
usually
of the like I see his face and I know I've seen him in a lot of things, but I'm not really
yes.
on his IMDb. Like what are some of the because I
Well,
know I've seen him in a lot though.
yeah. Well, interestingly enough, his first film roles were uncredited bit parts in two 1950 films that are kind of special to us:
Hmm.
the Asphalt Jungle
Oh,
and Sunset Boulevard.
oh.
He's in both of those
We
films.
covered both of those movies.
Yeah, but he's uncredited, so he's just like a bit player in those. And his first credited role was in 1951 in a movie called The Man with My Face, which is not a movie I know. I don't. I think it's a film noir. Uh,
Sounds like a film noir.
yeah, I don't recognize that one, but he's in all kinds of things. Run Silent, Run Deep, From Here to Eternity.
Oh, from here to
Uh,
eternity. Okay.
yeah, Donovan's Reef. Uh,
What are the four highlighted films from him on IMDb?
on the IMDb, let me just take a look. The four films that they list at the top are And Justice for All,
Mm.
1979, 12 Angry Men,
Mm. That's a popular
uh,
one.
yeah, While You Were Sleeping, 1995,
Mm.
and All the President's Men,
Oh, All the
1976.
President's Men. That's another good one.
Yeah, yeah. So I
Interesting.
mean,
Interesting.
he's in tons of stuff. He's in movies like Mighty Aphrodite, the Woody
Mm.
Allen film
Here we
Bulworth.
have the reverse footage, like you mentioned before. What's interesting
Yes,
here is they come every few months, a couple times a year, right? A few times a year. He said
yes,
he's been with her for 11 months, almost
yes,
a full year. Why is this
yes.
the first time the other astronauts are seeing her? Again, it doesn't affect the story, but it's
Yeah,
just one of those like maybe they could have caught that on another draft of the script that he said they
yeah,
were together for 11 months, but then they also said they come like four times a year. So,
yeah. I just assumed that he would hide her, because he knew that he wasn't supposed to have her.
but
And
then
I actually,
then this lead astronaut here says, "Oh, I completely forgot about her."
yeah, that's true. But I suppose if he was hiding her and they've been back a couple of times, maybe.
But why would he
He,
think he had to hide her? When he acts like she should come, he's not acting like it's someone that he wants to hide or thinks that he needs to hide.
yeah, well, not in this moment. That's true.
Yeah.
But I think though that he was told, wait till the other guys are gone before you open the box, and
Mhm.
like I think it could get him in trouble, the captain of the ship here.
I
Um,
don't want to sidetrack us. I'm just it's not important. We
yeah,
should
no,
I don't let me sidetrack. This is a really great part in the story here.
it
The
is.
way
Yeah,
the information is revealed because we
yeah,
don't necessarily know she can't go back. You can add it up yourself, but that's
Yeah.
what brings adds to the intrigue is getting the facial reactions, the contrast in emotions, and
Yes.
of course this guy here. Oh, Corey.
Yeah, that's right. And I actually thought that maybe what was going to happen when I first saw this was that he was going to decide not to go back, that he was going to say, I'm just going to stay here. And he was going to stay with his woman, you know. But of course
I
that
thought he'd just kill that goofy guy and say, all right, we got enough weight now.
yeah, that's true. Yeah. That didn't occur to me, but that's yeah.
He's a criminal. He murdered
That's
someone,
yeah,
which is another
well,
aspect of this. So they brought up the fact that early on in their first visit, that a lot of people believe he didn't do it, right?
yes.
And he's our protagonist. So we in
Yes.
turn want to believe he didn't do it. But then
Yes.
when they say he got a pardon, they didn't make it about him being innocent. They made it about
No.
no one else is going to be treated this way. So it's kind of
Yeah.
interesting. They had an opportunity to exonerate him, but they made
Yeah.
it more about the law change rather than him being free because they found him innocent.
Yeah. Well, I suppose that kind of thematically works in a way because, it's more about the cruelty of this punishment, putting a guy here by himself. This seems like cruel and unusual punishment, even if he was guilty. So
Mhm.
the fact that he may be innocent, but even if he's not,
But
even
what
if
is
he's,
that, like Chekhov's gun? Like, why leave that
yeah,
piece of information there if you're not going to come back to it? They
yeah,
dropped that seed in our head. He may not have done it, but it amounted to nothing. Initially, it seems like it's a big part of the story.
yeah,
Here's a guy stuck an astronaut for a crime he didn't commit, but at the end, it has nothing to do with the story at all.
yeah, true enough. Yeah. But,
Here they're
but
running
yeah,
after the robot.
yes. And of course, this is the moment here, which is kind of like what you were saying, that in a way, she doesn't appear to them the way she appears to him.
Mhm.
And of course I found myself wondering, is that just because she's choosing not to in this moment? Like she's
She's so
shy?
unresponsive, right?
Yes.
What's
And of course,
interesting is that she looks so human, and the other astronauts don't know she's a robot. You
no.
figured there would be some kind of reaction from them. Like, what are you doing? You're about to kill that woman. You know,
Yes. And that is just a shocking moment, I have to say.
that is
I
a
mean,
very good shot. That's a very good
yeah.
shot. It's a
Yeah.
classic Twilight Zone image.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And even today it's shocking, to see him pull the trigger and then see her face. Like it still has some power, I
I
think.
think that face had more impact on our protagonist than it had on me.
Oh
Because
yeah.
watching this, I'm like devastated. I'm like, oh my God, like she's dead. He's like, oh well, I'll try to remember not to be so lonely. Let's go, guys. It's like the
Yeah.
minute he sees that robot face
Yeah. Yeah.
underneath the mask, his
Yeah.
emotions are just like, ah, gotta remember, stop being so lonely. I'm driving myself. Robot. Jeez, what's wrong with me?
Yeah, it's like he's been
It took
woken
all
up
the
or something.
morality and the questioning of what's real, what's not real, what constitutes humanity. You know, it takes all of that out of the window with his like subdued kind of like, melancholy, non-reaction reaction.
Yeah, yeah, but
I love these establishing shots here at the end too. You almost
yes,
wish they incorporated the background more than just for the wide shots. If maybe
yeah,
he drove his car with her in it, no gasoline,
yeah,
but so what? There was no electricity, you know?
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
just to
yeah,
take advantage of the location a little bit more, especially hearing the backstory that you told of what they went through. You just wish it was more incorporated, especially knowing some of the low budget episodes of the show we've seen. The fact that they're doing on scene location, it would have been interesting.
yeah. True, and interestingly enough, this one does feel more filmic than say the last one,
Yeah,
but it actually has been done as a play. Somebody adapted this and performed it as a play, so it could still work as a play, because it's a small scale story in a way, but it feels filmic when you watch it, I think.
absolutely. So I hope I wasn't too negative, pointing out the things that I thought was kind of funny about the inconsistencies and the lack of logic. But I thoroughly enjoyed this. This is my second favorite episode of this rewatch. It's It's not close to number one because number one is really up there for me. Might be my favorite at Twilight Zone of all time. But there's a big gap between two, three, four, five. It's a lot better than the others, even though it's not number one. It has a lot of clearing distance from the other episodes.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. This is my second favorite too. And yeah, the first one is still number five and amazing. But this one is definitely my second favorite. And I think it is a classic that stands the test of time.
Yeah. All right. Hope you guys enjoyed this rewatch with us. Okay, I'll say this at the end for those who made it at the end. I know a lot of people are like, "Hey, this is bait and switch. We just want to watch the episode." Well, it's the fucking Twilight Zone. This was made in the 50s. You can't find somewhere on the internet to watch this for free or just buy the freaking DVD. So, yes, you're watching it with us. It's a freaking rewatch and watch along. Deal with it, people. Brangus Combe. This is Sean Weathers. You've been watching not the Twilight Zone. You've been watching Screened. Till next time.